Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this video we're going to be looking at some of the work of Colonel Monstery. Now, if you go on my YouTube channel, you'll find lots of material about Monstery, a Danish-American swordsman, adventurer, boxer, all-round very interesting character. Now, in some of the writings he talks about his boxing techniques, and they're relatively peculiar to the period. They're very different from other types of pugilism at the time. Now, one of the main things about this handsome chap here and his particular style of pugilism is that it's predominantly self-defense, self-protection orientated. Now, whilst boxing of the period was known as the noble art of self-defense, or the manly art of self-defense, or the noble science of self-defense, in reality many of the people writing the books and the guides were amateur or professional boxers that do it as a sporting pastime. The ancillary benefit being the self-defense, self-protection, in no difference to today. If you go to an average boxing gym, they're not really talking about boxing for self-defense, although everybody's aware how useful it will and could be. Monstery is very much about self-defense, self-protection, and therefore it is focused on the bare knuckle, and it's focused on practical applications to keep people safe. So a very interesting volume. Now, you'll have seen in the other videos some of the peculiarities about how Monstery stands. You know, a typical boxing guard for the period. I'm naturally southpaw, so I will probably for most of the video adopt a southpaw position, but I will attempt a little bit of orthodox for you now. Traditional positions of the period would be something like this, barring the mark, the solar plexus, having some degree of extended supinated guard. You do see some boxers that have them rising up, but in essence from here to here is a pretty typical guard of the period. However, Monstery has something a little bit different in that his lead hand, for most people that would be their left hand, that is held out like so, in a supinated fashion, somewhat extended off the hip. The rear hand, which for most people is the right hand, is held chambered like so, so elbow tucked in, fists pointing towards the opponent. So you end up with two fists pointing at the opponent, which is very important. You know, this is my weapon. There's a very short distance between this weapon and the eventual target. So from his fencer's pedagogy, from his fencer's mindset, having his fist pointing towards the opponent is essentially like keeping them on guard. There's no point my sword pointing in opposite random directions. It's directly at the person to whom my fists are addressing. So you've got a rather unique Monstery guard anyway, in that it's perhaps a little bit more self-protection orientated. It covers a high line and a low line. Obviously this period there is still much milling, so there is movement of the hands to aid them in ramping up speed, being a bit more unorthodox in the angles they can find. But in essence, in a potted nutshell, and you'll find more on other areas on my YouTube page, Monstery stands like this. And he boxes in a relatively peculiar way. Now, I'm going to focus on an area called half-arm blows and full-arm blows, and why they're important, especially for people that are looking to box for self-protection or self-defense. So, in the Monstery philosophy, a full-arm blow is a blow that comes when the hands are on or around the waist. You see some of the drawings and illustrations, and it looks not a million miles away from what you expect to see in karate. People standing there with their hands on their waist in pretty much exactly this fashion and firing out an entire full arm shot. An entire full arm shot from the hands being here. A half arm blow would be something that happens, say, from here to here, using essentially half the arm's full extension to hit the opponent. In the same way, a kind of modernish boxing guard, that would be considered a half-arm blow. A full-arm blow, according to Monstery, is about coming from a low-line position, from the waist position. So far, so simple. Now, as you can imagine, in a match fight, in a pugilistic match, there's no point, unless you've got very good reflexes, of keeping the hands down low, keeping the hands here, unless you have Muhammad Ali level, hyper-tuned, counter-punching, evasion, both of which are hugely perishable skills. So perishable in the ring with age, also perishable on the street with fear, adrenal stress, and so on. But go with me on this. Most people that keep their hands this low are at the complete top of their game. Super skilled, super sharp, training all day, every day professional. Now, again, most boxers, even very highly paid professional boxers, people do all the time, most people have their guard much higher. Very high, or even in the middle distance, or even you see people like this. But there is a consensus that if you're in a fight, you're going to have your hands up, chin down, protect yourself at all times. It's pretty standard fare. Which is fine. Going into a match fight, you're ready for it. Both parties know that boxing is going to happen. Monstery is writing for self-defense, self-protection. So his system has to factor in, I have no idea that bad guy Bob is going to attack me until bad guy Bob attacks me. And therefore, my hands are likely to be in normal people positions doing normal people stuff. So if you imagine, I'll be at the bar holding a pint. In a more modern day context, I might be at the ATM or the cash machine drawing out money. In a modern day context, I might be looking at my phone. But either way, most people historically and present day don't walk around with their hands up high in this environment. This feels unnatural and invasive unless you're in a very lucid conversation with people. Often your hands are down low. This is a non-threatening, normal way for humans to stand and walk, and has been for a very long time. So Monstery's consideration is you need to get good at throwing shots from full arm positions. So how can I go from low hands, my hands were in my pockets, my hands were in my belt, I was looking at my timepiece, or in modern day context, I'm looking at my phone, I'm at the ATM, I'm at the bar. How do you get your hands from a normal position and fire a full arm blow? And it's a really important skill to generate, because odds are the first shot in most confrontations that you didn't see coming will come from this low position. Whether I get a tap on the shoulder, I have to turn and fight. Whether I realise there's a threat and I'm at the cash machine, whether I've been being stupid playing on my phone and the threat is directly here, my hand has to go from low to high relatively quickly. So historically and modern day, being able to hit from down here is very important, because that's where your hands spend most of their time. So if we just take the notion of full arm blows. Now, the way to practice them kind of in a very basic format would be this. Your left leg's forward, your right leg's back, your hands are at your hips, and Monstery shows the hands being fully supinated like so. And what you do, you take your left hand, or your lead hand, you bring it diagonally up, so diagonally up, 45 degrees, and out, and at the last minute, your right shoulder and your left fist align. You're in a straight line, so you are turning pretty much fully side on, striking out with a vertical fist, which is much safer for bare knuckle striking. So you've gone from here, and you've fired that. You've used the torque of your hip, turning of your feet, turning of your shoulder. You've fired this in. Now, it's got some good benefits. One of these benefits is this. I'm trying to show you a decent angle of this here. Because of the way this shot comes out, the shoulder raises up. So the vulnerable side of your jaw and your neck is relatively well protected from the side which most represents your opponent's right hand. Most people are right-handed. So if my left hand shoots out with a high shoulder, it means that his likely right cross counter, or his right-fisted attack, will hit the harmless, meaty chunk of my shoulder and not the line of my jaw. Or let's assume that he is armed, for argument's sake, and again, he's a rough and tumble guy, he's the Colonel Monstery. Let's say he is armed, the stab is going into my shoulder or a beefy part of my arm, as opposed to my jugular. So whether he's armed or not, whether he's got a club, a knife, or a fist, by firing in this way, I've used my shoulder to protect my jaw, protect my neck. It's also harder to strangle me if this arm is in the way. You know, when you're answering the phone, when people are trying to get that particular chokehold on you, having something covering an artery and keeping your jaw safe is a good thing to do. Even if he surprised and whacked me with his left hand, the fact that my head is relatively safely tucked into this shoulder means that it's very hard to shake my brain enough to knock me out. So it's an added benefit. These benefits add up, they're cumulative. So I keep my jaw safe, I keep my neck safe, and in essence I've developed what Monstery would call a power line. In the same way that a fencer may lunge like so, I've developed an entire line of power from my right shoulder to my left fist. Or if you're southpaw, from here, whoop, you've turned your body in a straight line with a direct line of power from one shoulder to the subsequent fist. You've moved yourself side on. As the nature of that, your shoulder will rise, keeping you a bit safer. It's a nice technique to use. So, good way to start drilling this. Start in the Monstery fashion, whichever lead is your favourite. For me, that's my right hand lead. So from here, I launch this out, up and diagonal, straight into the opponent. And I've got some degree of leaning into the opponent at the end. It's different from a latter day drop step technique in that there is no deep lunge. There is no deep lunge or drop step. Most of the other pugilism guides at the time would have this. It's a bit of a shallower lunge from here, full arm blow, from there, bam, straight in, straight in, straight in. So your body's a bit more bladed, which could make you a little bit more vulnerable for grappling, but if you're caught by surprise and your hands are down low, you launch this out and smash him with your initial lead off. From there. So Monstery's full arm blow is typically with your lead hand, but it could be either hand, because bear in mind that you're not often stanced up. So if I turn around and I'm at the bar and you're here, both my hands and my feet might be relatively square. So my lead off, my full arm lead off, could be equally with my left hand or my right hand. It doesn't really matter, because most of the time you're not walking around. You know, you don't go around the supermarket in a boxer's shuffle. You don't navigate life like this unless you're insane. Most people walk around pretty normally. There's a 50-50 chance I'm going to have left foot forward or right foot forward. So in reality, you need to get used to full arm blows with either hand being the lead hand. Twisting those shoulders so they're in a straight line, raising that shoulder so it covers your jaw, hitting with a vertical fist. From here, Monstery's full arm blow. And that bears fruit if you think about being attacked from behind. If we get attacked from behind, I can start my full arm blow behind me. So imagine I'm from here, straight away. Straight away, I can turn as I'm firing that shot. As I'm turning, that shoulder's keeping my jaw safe, stop me from being rocked, bang, straight from here. And I end up in that final position, with the arms somewhat bladed, which is quite peculiar to Monstery, considering most lead-offs at the time are like so. So you've got full arm hitting. And these are things you can practice. So for example, let's imagine, for argument's sake, do bear with me, imagine that you've been caught out texting on your phone. And most people text around waist height, blah, 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 blah. Now, I've just stumbled across the threat because I've been stupid. I can't reset my fists up here and then hit him. So all I need to do, I've been caught here, my full arm blow, from here, comes straight off. I can let go of the phone, I can keep hold of the phone till the last minute, it doesn't really matter, but I've managed to take a modern everyday action, such as putting money in a wallet, using your phone, checking the time, anything that happens down here, and you port it into a full arm blow. So far so good. So I'd advise, if you take time covering anything of Monstery's, get used to full arm blows. Full arm blows, they're really important. And abandon the idea of being orthodox or southpaw, because odds are if you're doing a full arm blow, you have to be conversant with both. Either could be a full arm blow, if that makes sense. Either of these at any one time could be a full arm blow. And in my hands, I could be doing anything, having conversation, hands in the pocket, hands on my phone, looking at my watch, whatever I'm doing. Odds are, in the initial foray, if I've not seen it coming, and many attacks happen when you don't see it coming, it comes from down low. So therefore, your ability to fire a full arm blow with strength, power, surprise, structural integrity in that Monstery fashion is a very useful tool to have, and not seen in many other pugilistic manuscripts, many other treaties. A half arm blow. So as I mentioned, Monstery very uniquely talks about being able to fight and box and throw attacks from the hands down here, but naturally it's faster and more scientific if they're up. So if the threat is already made clear and I've already clocked onto it and I know a fight's happening, of course I could, in theory, in a more modern day context, you can use the fence, talking hands, de-escalate, escalate, whatever you need to do from here. Or, indeed, I can adopt a guard, if I so wish. Or if the fights happen up, shit, this is on now. So you know you can immediately move into the Monstery guard, which has the elbows tucked. It's already got one hand supinated, which is a nice way to achieve an underhook. So having this supinated fist allows me to get an underhook, it allows me to grapple competently, but it also has one fist directly at face height. At any one point, I can smash him with this hand. So when you look at things like half-arm blows, they typically come from a point of being on guard, like so, in the Monstery fashion, or indeed any other fashion, or from a talking hands position, where I've clocked the threat, I know the threat's here, I can talk, have some degree of fence, and de-escalate, deter, make my way at the scenario. But in either way, now the hands are high, I move into a type of hitting called half-arm blows. And these are essentially, with the lead hand, it's the exact same philosophy. The shoulders still blade, so the shoulders still turn, and you drive straight in. You'll notice, again, peculiar to Monstery, is that you end up with this runway here for your rear fist. So he keeps the secondary fist almost chambered halfway, so that when I follow up, the shoulders will naturally square. Bam! Do you see? So the lead blow leads you relatively bladed, you wind yourself up, and then you unwind using this fist, which is already pointed at the target. Which makes a good degree of sense, especially if you look at this coming from a weapon-orientated individual. I've hit him here, why would I not point the next weapon directly at a target? So whether I hit him in the chest, whether I hit him in the face, the fact that you've ended up in this position here, or this position here, has chambered the fist in essentially on a runway. I've got a guideline for the next shot. The rear hand blows in the Monstery system, if you imagine, all lead hand hitting, full arm or half arm, come with a twist, a bladed motion. The rear hand, he refers to it almost like the walking beam of a train. So let's imagine I've got that first shot off. It rolls, so it comes into the centre of mass, rolls and squares the body up a little bit more. Bladed, more square. Bladed, more square. So essentially, unwind, wind. Sorry, wind, unwind. It's not too dissimilar to an archery style motion. If you imagine it's a different delivery mechanism, but makes sense. So, full arm blows, come from the waist, are really good for surprise, self-protection, ambush scenarios, being able to punch people naturally from the side, from the front. Another important thing about Monstery is I need to get used to attacks from the side. Not everything I'm square on to. I don't know the threats here, so I need to be able to do a full arm blow from the side. Straight off, a full arm blow from behind. I need to be able to have a 360 approach to my pugilism. And again, they can happen from either hand because you never know which is going to be in front, if any, at any one time, or if the threat's that way, boom, I need to be able to do a full arm blow this way. The threat's over here, boom, I need to be able to do a full arm blow that way. Half arm blows typically happen as any strike which comes chambered from a guard, with this hand or that hand, but they typically follow half the amount of distance. The lead hand typically still has that shoulder alignment. The rear hand has you square off a little bit more. So, full arm lead off, half arm lead off, half arm cross, or rear hand I should say more accurately. So there you go, bit of a primer on full arm and half arm hitting, a really useful and interesting, I'd say unique part of Monstery's pugilism. Definitely something to play with, especially if you're interested in pugilism for self-defense, self-protection. The first strike or the preemptive strike may often come from a full arm position when you're not ready, or your half arm pugilistic blows will just as likely come from something like a fence as it would from a guard. But in essence, they're interchangeable between discussing hands and a Monstery guard. There's not much between the two. You can still operate those relatively easily. So very interesting self-defense system. Very simple, easy to pick up, easy to train pugilism for self-defence. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers.